I pledge allegiance
to
to
the
the
flag of the
United States of America,
and to
and to the
republic
republic
for which it stands,
which stands,
under
one
nation,
nation,
God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
All right, Clerk Cody, roll call, please.
Supervisor Gunning,
Here.
Treasurer Rice,
Here.
Trustee Worley,
Here.
Trustee Hauk,
here.
Trustee Lannon,
Here.
Trustee Milky,
Virtually here.
Clerk Cody here.
All right, let's take item 4 on the agenda, approval of the agenda. We need a motion.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion, support, discussion. Seeing none. Roll call on this one, Clerk Cody. This will be to approve the agenda.
Clerk Cody, yes. Trustee Milky,
Yes.
Trustee Lannon,
Yes.
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
Trustee Worley,
Yes.
Treasurer Rice,
Yes.
Supervisor Gunning.
Yes. Agenda's approved. We move to item 5, presentations. We have the 2019 audit presentation. This would be Yo and Yo,
Yes, and if,
and
right.
Miss
And if
Ellie
I may,
Barnes.
and if I may, by way of introduction, I'm going to share the screen for the presentation. So if this works, you'll see this, the presentation on your screen.
Cool.
Okay. And so before I introduce Barnes, just want to remind everybody that the purpose of the audit is for the auditors to express an opinion as to whether the financial statements are our responsibility, are fairly represented, free of any material misstatement, and so that they can be read and utilized by those that rely on them. To make this determination, the auditors do look at internal controls relevant to the preparation of the financial statements, but only to that extent. They're not doing a internal control audit, if you will. And so to present the results for FY19, we have Miss Allie Barnes with us tonight. She's the principal of Yo and Yo. And Allie, I'll turn it over to you.
Mark, if I may interject real quickly, I just want to check with the rest of the board members if we're getting back feed.
Yeah, I just texted him and told him there's an echo.
Yeah, very bad.
His end.
We had that the other night in the EDA too on the live stream.
So I'm hearing echo back feed from all of you as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if it improved when I turned my volume down when I was speaking. I don't know if it's better right now than it was a minute ago. But it may be something that we have to live with for the moment.
How about when I talk? Does it echo also?
No.
No.
Mark, are you logged in with audio on your computer and your phone by chance?
No, just my computer.
Okay. That's the only way I know how to fix it. Okay, well, if you can hear me, fine. I will go ahead and get started. Thank you for having me on your meeting this evening. Mark is gonna do his best here to flip through the slides as I go. So if you wanna maybe flip to the next slide to get started. Primarily, we're gonna spend our time talking about general fund. Mark did a nice introduction to what an audit is and kind of isn't. We're not giving an opinion necessarily on internal controls and compliance, even though we do look at those two areas. So the township received an unmodified or clean audit opinion this year. So that's the opinion wording that you want to be seeing when you look through the report. And we also did not issue any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies as they relate to internal controls. So that's also very positive information for you to know. The systems in place are designed well and they are operating as intended. So you won't see any other kind of finding information as we go throughout the presentation. Okay, so for 2019, general fund ended the year with just over 2.1 million in revenues. You can see the green piece of the chart there makes up the most significant, which would be your state shared revenue, bringing in about 1.2 million. And then the second most significant category being property taxes, which brings in roughly 470,000 for the year. You want to go down a page? Here you can see the trend of revenue over the last 5 years. So really, it's been pretty steady with a slight trend upward. 2019 was just slightly more than 2018. There were really two categories of your revenue that increased. There was over $40,000 increase in your state shared revenue. And then there was also an increase in the amount of interest income that the township earned. So I know money was put into some different accounts that were just able to earn more interest for you this year. Okay, you can go to the next page. Here we can see your general fund expenditures then for 2019 came in at just over 1.4 million. So the general category typically it makes up the majority of your expenditures, and that holds true this year as well, accounting for about 52% of those total expenditures. After that, your public safety accounts for about 20% of your general fund expenditures for 2019. Then if we go to the next slide, we can see kind of trend information again there. So 2018 and 2019 really were neck and neck. No significant increase or decrease in those expenditures at all. And so you're spending less than you are bringing in revenue, which we can see on the following slide when we take a look at your general funds fund balance. You'll see from 2018 to 2019, there was a significant increase there. You had just over 4 million in fund balance at the end of 2018 and inching towards 5 million there in 2019. We did break out some more of your fund balance into different categories for 2019. So the majority is still unassigned there, made up in the blue part of the chart. And the next most significant category is going to be assigned fund balance. So that's something where you've already designated money to be used towards a particular project. And in this case, there had been money approved for road projects. So the money won't be spent until 2020, but it has been set aside to be able to use some of fund balance towards those projects. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. All right, here we can see general funds fund balance as a percent of expenditures. A common kind of percentage that people take a look at when looking at the health of a township or any kind of governmental run agency. So again, trending upwards for the past several years here. 2019's amount is just over 325%. So technically that would mean that you could live off of your fund balance for a couple of years here. Or that means that you're putting money aside for future projects that might be larger in nature that you have to do some saving for. But all in all, a very healthy fund balance sitting there in the general fund. Okay, we'll look at the next slide. Okay, so a couple other funds to talk about. I always like to touch on the enterprise type funds, so you can kind of see what's going on there, because those are pretty significant. And obviously you're providing a major service to your residents in those funds. So the water fund, which is depicted here, you'll see total revenues in the blue line have exceeded total expenses in the red line for the past 5 years, and by a decent amount. So you're definitely not overspending in that fund. And oftentimes we want to see this type of a picture because we know then you're able to bring in some cash and be able to put those towards some capital project type improvements in that type of a fund. If we go over to the sewer fund, we'll see kind of a similar picture. Okay, so again, for the last 5 years, total revenues have exceeded your total expenses in this fund. So again, I would say that these two funds are in a pretty healthy position, given your operating structure and your rates that you're charging to residents versus your expenses that you're bringing in. So we can see on the last slide here, the results. So when we have on those other two charts where we have operating revenues that are exceeding operating expenditures over time, that usually indicates that we're going to have some additional working capital on hand to be able to use. So this is where we take our current assets and deduct our current liabilities and see what's left over. So you'll see for both the water and the sewer fund for the past 5 years, that working capital amount has increased every one of those years. So a very healthy and positive trend to be seeing in those funds as well. So all in all, we did not have any issues in performing the audit. Management, as they have been in the past several years, have been really good to work with, incredibly prepared. This was the first time we have done your audit 100% remotely, given all the shutdowns. And even with that, I think we actually issued the report a day or two earlier even than we did in the previous year. So Sherry just did a phenomenal job being prepared, following up on our requests, providing information via the portal and being available by phone. And we really appreciate her efforts. She's always great to work with, but this was especially a trying year just given the current situation we're all in. So we really appreciate her effort in getting the audit done. And I would take any questions if you have them.
Ally, for 2020, I mean, we can pretty much all assume that, maybe I'm just assuming this, but do you predict like state shared revenues will be down and maybe interest income will be down?
I would expect to be seeing that. They did post some new estimates for the state shared revenue a week ago, I believe. So there is some information out there, but yes, I think with people not traveling as much and not out and about shopping as much, it is likely that state shared revenue will decrease. By how much, I don't know. Same thing with interest income. Yeah, rates are likely to decrease, but again, we don't know exactly the impact of that. So definitely something to consider, you know, when you're looking at your budget amendments for 2020.
Right. Well, it's good to have a healthy fund balance.
See, Brian Milkey has his hand up.
Thank you, Supervisor Gunning. Yes, Ally, this is somewhat unrelated other than you spoke to it in the beginning. I served on this board up until 2016, and then just recently was appointed to fill in for a trustee that left. So I'm back again. But looking back at some of the audits that were done in my previous term, we got knocked a couple times for some control issues, and those were fixed before we left by and large. But I guess what I want to ask you is, you're not giving your opinion specifically on this, and you did give some marks saying, yeah, but what we see looks good. Would it be a useful tool to do a proper audit just from an internal control perspective? And I ask that only because, we had embezzlement back in 2008 in our township. And not that I suspect that with any staff that we have now or any of the trustees, but is that a reasonable exercise to go through on a periodic basis?
That's something that you could do, but we don't typically see that happening unless you believe there is an issue. We, as a part of the audit, even though we're not issuing an opinion, we look at an awful lot. So we take a look at different transaction cycles, such as your cash disbursements, cash receipts, how payroll flows throughout your system. We take a look at the utility billing, and then we also look at journal entries and test those for any issues. And then we have some tests that we kind of do on a rotating basis. It kind of depends on the year, but we might look at credit cards, or we'll do a more in-depth test of electronic banking transactions. We might focus on employee reimbursements. So there's quite a few areas that we are in fact looking at, and if we saw a major deficiency, we would call that out in the form of a significant deficiency or a material weakness within the communication that would come to the board. So
Okay.
I would say, unless you have more of a direct concern, you probably don't need that at this time.
I just didn't know if that was a best practice to do that every so many years. I think it was in 14 or 15, we got dinged for how the credit cards were being processed through the township. I think you were involved in that even then.
Probably.
Yeah, because I think that's about the time Yao Yao came on, was 14 or so. Does that sound right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And okay, well, that's helpful. I mean, I didn't see anything that alarmed me. I have no suspicious feelings of anything, but didn't know if that was a best practice. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any more questions for Ms. Barnes?
Tim had.
Okay, I'm looking for the blue hands there, Tim.
Yeah, I can't find it.
That's all right. You have a question.
There it is.
There we go.
Just a comment, as a fairly long-term trustee on the board since 2008. Yo and Yo were doing our financial audits back at that time. After about 5 years, we thought at the time it was prudent maybe to go to another auditing firm, and we did for a very short time and went back to Yo and Yo. But in this time, we've always, since 08, have had a very prudent and sound financial situation in the township. And we have come and made some improvements through these financial audits, through recommendations where there were material weaknesses found, but they were never such that we were not ever in strong position. We have always been in a strong position since 08. Contrary to some media that ran during a certain cycle a few years ago that were trying to indicate that the township was spending more than they were taking in, but that was by design. So since 08, we have always been quite strong, and we've improved our internal controls and practices. So very proud of the township staff to make that happen. And just again to indicate what you may have heard at one point in time, we never have been in a weak position and always continue to have been strong. So thank you.
All right. Any more questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Thank you, Ally. Appreciate it. As always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ally. A great job.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Always.
All right, that brings us to item 7, public comment. This is going to be restricted to 3 minutes regarding items on this agenda. This will not be an opportunity for any questions to be answered by the board. It's strictly present your concerns. So public comment is now open. And if anyone would like to speak in public comment, please raise the hand. And so you'd want to hit the participants. And then to the right, you'll see raise hand. Okay, Mr. Buckley.
Hey, hold on. now.
Yes. I'm not
I
sure.
don't have any video of you, but we have your voice.
Oh.
There we go. Now we got both.
Sorry, I had to hide in my bedroom. My name is Ryan Buckley. I am at 3978 McGurk Street in Union Township. I recognize each of you. I'm a planning commissioner and a zoning board of appeals member, but I just wanted to make a quick public comment tonight regarding one of the items on your agenda to discuss the cost sharing of special assessments. And I wanted to give you a little feedback as a resident. And I'm doing so a little bit on behalf of one of the residents of my subdivision who could not be online tonight. It sounds like she was out of town, but she had kind of spearheaded an effort to get a special assessment district done in our subdivision to have the road resurfaced. Our subdivision, like many subdivisions, is about 20 to 25 years old now in terms of the actual quality of the road itself. But it was significantly affected by the 2017 floods, and it's increasingly in need of a special assessment district. Pat has come to me multiple times to get a little advice about it, but her experience has been what I would say probably less than what we can provide as a township. And she's struggled to get information about how we go about getting a special assessment district. She's also struggled to understand the costs that have been assigned to these special assessment districts and whether or not there is a cost share that is available or whether it's not. And my only, I guess my comment that I'd like to make as you guys consider this and discuss this agenda item tonight, I was glad to hear Trustee Lannon say that as long as he's been on the board that we've been in strong financial position here. I do think it's within the township's capacity to be able to offer some cost share, but even in the event that there's not cost share that's available for these special assessment districts, I would encourage you strongly to consider a policy and approach that enables residents who do take the lead on trying to resurface their roads or trying to make improvements to their own residential community to do so in an expeditious and efficient manner. And I don't think that that's the experience that we've had to date. But I'm confident that we have the people on staff with the trustees that would be able to thoughtfully consider that and to make some improvements as to how we approach that process and how we can get things done a little bit more quickly and a little bit more effectively. And that's all
Thank you, Mr. Buckley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, this is public comment. If anyone out there would like to raise their hand and provide public comment, this would be on agenda items only. Going once, going twice. We close public comment at this time. And we move to item 8, reports and board comments. Let's see. Let's go to item C, Planning Commission and ZBA updates. And this would be by the Community and Economic Development Coordinator, Rodney Nanny. Mr. Nanny?
Well, thank you. Just a quick report. The Planning Commission did meet in May on their regular meeting on the 19th via Zoom. And they did take care of a number of items of business. They did elect new officers, although actually Ryan Buckley, congratulate him. He was elected as vice chair. Phil Squartito was reelected as chair. In addition, they took action on two applications they had before them. One is a special use permit for a group daycare home that they did make a recommendation for approval on that, which will be coming to you at your next meeting. It's anticipated to be on your next agenda for final action on that. They also approved a home occupation permit for a minor auto servicing activity. This is a family that owns a taxi cab company, and they wanted to be able to service the cab vehicles in a pole barn on the property, and they were granted a home occupation permit to do that as a very limited activity. In addition, they at the same meeting, the Planning Commission went over the updated draft of the proposed zoning ordinance in detail. This was actually, because of COVID-19, this was actually their first meeting where they had an opportunity to do that. And they spent a great deal of time on it. We went through the document. There are a number of good comments. That discussion will be continuing with the aim ultimately of looking at when they're comfortable with scheduling the public hearing for that updated zoning ordinance. The Plan Commission did set a special meeting for Monday, June 8th at 7 p.m. This will be for a public hearing on an amendment to the current zoning ordinance to take care of the details related to sand and gravel pits. This is part of the adoption of the extraction ordinance that you took action on. The zoning ordinance needs to be amended to be consistent with that. So they're holding that here on June 8th, and will ultimately be making a recommendation to the board on that item as well. It's anticipated that at that June 8th meeting that the discussion on the proposed zoning ordinance will also continue. The other item of business we have is the Zoning Board of Appeals did not have any applications, so their June meeting has been canceled. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Seeing no questions, thank you, Mr. Nanny. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we move to item D, board member reports. I'm going to start, I guess, with my screen. I'm going to go top right corner for 12 points. Brian Milkey.
I'm good. Thank you.
You good?
Back.
All right. Tim Lannon,
No reports, thank you.
Bill Hauk,
Nope, I haven't had any meetings.
Kimberly Rice.
Just a quick tax update. Taxes are going to be out in mailboxes for summer taxes July 1st. So those are in the process, and we'll be getting them to you.
Already?
Right.
I know, summer taxes. Can't help it.
Boy, oh boy.
Twice a year.
Trustee Worley.
Yes, I had a conversation with Frank Cordia from the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe. He's the public relations director, as you know now, and Eric Rodriguez, who had been the acting public relations director, is now the public relations manager. So they're still working together in that particular office. So I was inquiring a couple of things. One about the 2% distribution. The 2% distribution now, they're thinking that it might be in the second or third week of June. when they make their final determinations for those distributions. At that time, there won't be a in-person meeting as we've been accustomed to having at each of these semi-annual events. Instead, it will be a Zoom. If we are fortunate enough to receive a grant, we will then be going to the, you'll get a notification of that, and then you have an invitation to both receive the monies as well as be able to present, your appreciation and thanks. So that will be sometime in the second or third week of June that we should know where we stand with the 4 different items that we submitted. Second of all, June 6th, every year, they have the honor and remembrance ceremony over near the Indian boarding school grounds. And that's in honor of the children that had perished during the time of in boarding school. And so what they decided this year, because it really does require for everyone to be there in person, they're going to suspend it this year and resume again next year. So what I would just encourage folks to consider doing is that on June 6th, you may just want to make a visit over to the cemetery there over by the boarding school and maybe just, pay some respects. I think that would be a very worthwhile thing to be considering doing. I had gotten a text from Lisa the other day, and she had inquired too, is, with everything that, and I was on the same page as part of what I was going to be talking to Frank about, with them going through what they're going through now, with the fact that the casino's been closed all this time, and they've had some financial hardships, how can we as a township be available to help them? So I asked Frank, that question, what can we do to assist? And basically what he was just asking was for our support, our continued support, particularly in terms of the casino. We'll be having an opening, soft opening on Friday. And he would appreciate that, we publicly would be in support of that reopening because they have taken a tremendous financial hit by the casino and the resort being closed during this period of time. He suggested that, we're going to have a soft opening on Friday, and there will be a limited number of people that will be invited by attendance and by invitation to come. And then they'll be picking up after that. They'll be following all the CDC guidelines. All the staff there will be using PPE equipment. Guests will be required to be wearing masks. There will be physical distancing between all the different stations. Some of the activities will be limited as to what still will be done, but it is going to affect for some time their revenue. So that being said, I'm going back to Ali's report from this evening in terms of the audit, and we see that 57% of our revenue, comes through the form of state revenue sharing. Well, not only, this has a real trickle effect because not only is the state revenue perhaps being affected, but there's also discussion about, money coming from the federal government to support the states in order to support the townships. So this thing goes all the way down. So we're in the next period of time, we're going to be seeing certainly in our next budget that effect. And what I have heard is that that could be as much as 20% or more in terms of what the cost sharing effect might be. Now, that's just an estimate at this point, but it could be significant in terms of our revenue. With the tribe having been restricted with not having the resort and the casino open, I suspect that our next distribution period is also going to reflect that because, we get 58% of the gaming money that we get that goes towards that distribution for our activities in town. So again, that's going to be affected. So I think this is going to have a significant effect and make a real dent on all of us. And one last thing is that what I really appreciate is a lot of times we have discussion about maybe having too much money on hand. We should be, using more of that money more quickly. And I want to, being an old timer, I believe in a rainy day fund. And again, if the pandemic has proved anything to us, I think that our fiscal management of our staff has been tremendous. I think that, the decisions we have made have been really very fiscally responsible. And at the end of the day, with these cutbacks that are being anticipated, the distributions, the state revenue sharing, with those cutbacks being anticipated, we're still in good position because of the way we've been handling our township's funds for all these years. So I think it's, I think it's quite an accomplishment for all of us to realize, but also see there's going to be some effects of everything that's going on down the road. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Norm.
You're welcome.
Clerk Cody.
I kind of want to say something about Norm's conversation or his announcement. The casino is this Friday as a soft kind of opening. We are staff-wise having special training sessions for each of the groups of staff members to kind of deal with the public, stuff like that. And then they're going to be opening for the general public on the 1st, June 1st, the rest of the public. That's all I got.
Thanks.
All right. Oh, let's see. I don't have anything at this time. So,
Ben, can I inject something here?
yes.
So what are we doing now in terms of the PC vacancy? I had, at the end of last meeting, and I think both Tim and
You garbled there, Norm. I couldn't hear what you said.
You gotta get closer.
Is it better this way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Just what's the plan now for the PC? Being that we're going on 3 months. There has been a nominee that's been presented on 3 occasions now, all of which have been denied. So obviously that isn't going to be the solution. So what is it that we as a board can look forward to in terms of filling this position? Or do we simply wait the 6 months and let the next board and the next supervisor make that determination?
Well, we talked last time about offering up the option of bringing more nominations or more applications. So
You can come earlier.
I don't know if we've received any or not. I haven't seen anything from that respect, but
Well, we still have.
it's a 3-year commitment. It's a 3-year commitment, so I'm not going to just put anybody on there.
Sure, but we do still have 2 other applicants. The way
Right.
I understood the process to be
Exactly. Yeah.
was that we were going to have a pool of applicants. We gave a deadline as to when those applications were to submit to the township. And from those, we have already picked 3 positions for the PC. So there still are 2 more applicants that, if nothing else, should at least be considered with an up down roll call or a vote.
No,
In order to determine what
it's not gonna happen, Norm.
Okay, so you're basically saying is you're going to put that as a precedent over what is best for the township or for the needs of the.
I am doing what's best for the township.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It all depends on your perspective, Norm.
Well, we have 2 viable people there that could be brought
Yep,
up.
and I'm not going to get into a political issue like you guys are trying to make it.
Well, no,
So
I'm not making.
I'm not going to go I'm not going to go there, Norm. So we're moving on
I'm not done
to
yet. Ben. No, I'm not done.
consent
Sorry, Ben.
agenda, item 9.
I'm not done yet.
I'm the one that says when you're done and when you're not.
Well, I'm not done
It's my
yet.
meeting to run, you're done. Because
I'm
we're
not
not going to
done
do it, Norm.
Well, Then I think
We're not gonna do it.
I'm doing that. You're doing that in a political way.
I'm not doing it in a political way, sir.
Of the township. So
No. You guys are making it DNR. So
so
just like you did, you have from time that I've been on this board, it's all been about DNR, and I'm not going to do that.
it has not been.
It's about the best person, the most qualified person.
And there are qualified people on that application.
Yes, you are, but I don't feel comfortable with it. So that's my option.
Yeah.
So moving on to item 9, consent agenda. Need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Or
Discussion?
yeah, there were a few things on the minutes that I just wanted to review. On the board agenda A, it says Worley move, Cody to approve. It should have been Worley move, Cody supported. The supported should have come after the Cody on that one. And that'd be on discussion item A. You see that?
Oh, yep, Cody.
So it should be Cody to approve. Also, in the final board comments, Tim Lannon had mentioned, going back to review the meeting, had mentioned that he was disappointed with the lack of nomination for the PC. And so his comment was not added there. And then I had a final board comment similar to that, but that I was also asking that the current applicants be brought up at the next meeting for an up and down vote. And that was my final board comment. So neither one of those two things were added there. So I just wanted to make that apparent.
Okay, so we need to change the motion. Who made the original motion to approve?
I did. I'll change the motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes made as discussed to the minutes.
I supported, and I'll support with the noted corrections added.
Motion to support. And further discussion?
Just an FYI, I did the check register from the information provided in the board packet. It was a very small list of warrants that were brought before us to consider compared to traditional bi-monthly amounts. There were 29 checks. 2 of them were void checks due to running processes of the checks, and all seem to be in order from my view.
All right, further discussion? Seeing none, this is to approve the consent agenda. Clerk Cody?
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
trustee Milky,
Yes.
trustee Lannon,
Yes.
trustee Worley,
Yes.
clerk Cody, yes, supervisor Gunning,
Yes.
treasurer Rice.
Yes.
Okay, that moves us to new business. First item on new business is the approval of the proposals from Goodrow and Associates and Central Michigan Serving and Development on the Jamison Park Master Plan improvements. Mark, you want to lead us into this?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Can't hear you, Mark. Your mic's off.
The proposal that you have in front of you tonight is for the provision of creation of construction documents, certain site plan documentation that's needed, support for reviewing bids once we receive them, and then construction management services. This is set up to have this work done for the entirety of the Jamison Park Improvement Program. The FY 2020 budget has $211,000 budgeted for this program, funded by in part by the general fund, the EDA fund, and the 2% residual fund balance that exists. We have applied for a 2% grant in the amount of $187,000. If received, the total funding for this program will be just under $400,000. We anticipate this project, when I look at it in its entirety, and I'm assuming for the sake of this item that we'll receive the 2% grant request. The project's anticipated to be completed in 2 phases. One phase would be the fall of 2020, and then the second phase would begin in the fall of 2020 and continue through 2021. The list of improvements, just to refresh your memory, are in the packet. They include exterior building improvements, interior building improvements, site improvements, exterior site improvements, and some mechanical and electrical improvements. The $53,000 is allocated $15,300 to Central Michigan Surveying, $35,000 to Goodrow, and then if needed, $2,800 to Snyder and Staley soil boring. The master plan and the overview of the master plan is also in your packet. I will note that if you did look at the end of the master plan and you saw a total north of $400,000, what I just described, totaling $398,000. Some of, well, the playground equipment that's part of the master plan, we've already kind of dealt with that through the grant with City of Mount Pleasant, and also with the improvement a couple meetings ago of the installation of that, both of which had already been budgeted for. If this is approved as indicated in the staff report, we would be back in front of you in July when we do budget amendment number 1 with a budget amendment of about $16,500, and that's primarily attributed to the site work and the site plan work that was not contemplated as part of the original master plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the proposal from Goodrow and Associates and Central Michigan Surveying and Development in the amount of $53,032 for the completion of construction documents and bidding services for the Jamison Park Master Plan improvements, and authorize the township manager to sign the agreements.
Support.
Okay, before the motion and the support, Mr. Hauk had his hand up, so I wanted to, let's give him the opportunity first. Bill?
No, that's okay. It's more of a discussion thing, so we can.
Okay, all right. So we do have a motion and a second on that. So we will open this up to discussion. The first up will be Trustee Hauk.
Mark, so say in the future, if we don't get this funding from our 2% request, what are we going to do? Are we going to go back through and make some cuts in this or what? I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty nice looking. It's going to be better looking than our township hall that we have our meetings in.
So what's in front of you tonight is for all the work associated with creating bid documents, bid review, construction management, and that is contemplating the entirety of the project. And so if, in your question or comment, we did not receive the 2%, we would still be moving forward with the creation of these documents.
Right.
And what we'd be needing to do at that point is proceed to secure additional funding to fill the hole that would exist if the 2% grant does not come in its entirety or partially.
Did we approve this? I don't recall approving all these improvements. I mean, I know we were going to do some work there, and I know the EDA is involved in it, but
You have the Board of Trustees has approved via the 2020 budget adoption $211,000 of programming of construction work. And you have also approved the 2% application in the amount of $187,000.
right, I remember all.
Right, specifically for this, to complete the master plan. And all but 16,000 of this $53,000 request is built into the 211,000 and the 187,000. So all but 16,000 of this 53, part's been budgeted through your adoption of your 2020 budget, and the funding would be provided by the 2% grant, should we receive it.
Trustee Lannon.
Yeah, thank you. I would just mention, from my point of view, this is a very worthwhile project, and as a board, we've talked about bringing Jameson Park up to a township destination park, and this gets us on the way. Just to answer your question, Bill, from my perspective, if that funding didn't come through, it'd be up to the board, you and I and the rest of the board, to ask Mark to look into some additional funding. It'd be up to us to listen to potential cuts or things that might be recommended by staff, but the decision is in our hands.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
As we move forward, Mark, just a question for you. I know we're not at a point where we're approving contracts or anything like that, but I would really like to make sure that we take care of our township residents and taxpayers from the standpoint that I would like to see the Union Township, if they have a facility in the township or paying commercial property taxes, that they get at least a what I want to say. I would like to see the work being completed by our own tax-paying contractors. So I don't know when and if comes time to start bidding some of this stuff out, if that can be part of the language. I'm not familiar enough with how this stuff's done.
It will be bid out. I will tell you that the township, to my knowledge, does not have a local preference policy.
Well, I think it's something probably we can discuss as we move forward, correct?
The board can discuss whatever it would like. I'm just letting you know that currently we don't have
Okay.
one.
All right. Any further questions? Trustee Milky.
Thank you, Supervisor Gunning. I'm going to follow up on both what Trustee Hauk and Supervisor Gunning brought up. I agree with your comment, Ben, regarding trying to spend it local. It's always best to take our tax dollars whenever possible and reinvest those in our own community. You know, to the point where when I was on a previous board, as we would go through the bidding process and look at contracts, I always felt it's worth paying a small premium for local work or local supplier if possible. Obviously, there are cases where that can't work because someone may not provide a service or a good that's within our township. But I'm supportive of that idea. So thank you for bringing that up. But what I did want to bring a point to is follow up on Trustee Hauk's comments. And I'm going to pose these at you, Mark. So in the event that 2% funding wasn't available for this, from what I understand, from what Trustee Worley just said, is that we'll probably know that in 2 to 3 weeks. The earliest construction I saw here was this fall. Is that accurate?
I'd want Kim Smith to speak to that.
Yes, the earliest construction would be this fall. We have some restrictions. We have an election in August that's going to need to take place there. And we were slightly delayed by the COVID, people working at home. We had hoped to have this to you sooner so we could do some of the outside improvements and then pick up with the interior improvements later, kind of trying to work that into the schedule of the elections. Then we also have the November election. So we don't want to have the site totally tore up and then try to hold an election there. So to try to avoid that, the design will happen from now until, you know, September or however long that takes. Then we'll have at least a 30-day bid period, and then we'll go from there. Then we'll have construction to be started in the bid documents after the November election. It's possible, for instance, we're going to put the playground equipment in, hopefully in August. So some of that will be going on there, but we're going to try to mitigate interruption to election because it's already an issue with traffic. I know the elections may be different, but we want to be prepared in case things do open back up, and that does have to happen out there. So the majority of it will happen after the election. There may be some minor things, you know, we'll be going through bid documents, we'll be going through submittals. That takes some time. So there's all these things that can happen before we actually start tearing into the building or the site in too large of a degree.
That's helpful. So I guess my only concern is if we weren't to get that 2%, that's a lot of cash to find in a different bucket. And if we need to, I guess I'll direct this to Mark or Kim, whoever feels they are best to answer it. If we needed to adjust and that bucket wasn't coming in, the 2%, if we had to make some cuts, if that's what the board decided in a few spots, moving forward today with this wouldn't hinder that, would it?
So the design would still happen, Brian, the way this is set up.
Yep.
But the construction, we could certainly pull off pieces of the project. The way we tried to lay this out were things that kind of went together, so that if you're doing something in the building, if it affects something else, then that would be together. That's how we tried to lay these three little pieces out, these three pies out, way back when we talked about even the budgeting. So it would be possible to pull some of these things out of there so that we're not spending the whole pot that's towards the 2%.
Right. And that's how I read this document too, I guess, because I thought Bill's question was a good question. I guess I wanted some reassurance for Bill and myself that if we don't get it, that we can adjust and ask for flexibility what the future is, right? And maybe we only come up with another 150,000 out of the 187 that we've budgeted here.
Right, and the way that these are pieced out, each project's kind of each little section, so then we could pull some things out, and if we don't have all of the funding, then we can pick out the ones that we do have funding for and go at it that way.
Awesome, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Tim, I'm going to keep you on for a second. So EDA, I know we approved the 50,000, and I think that what we had committed to do were the interior code-related items, correct? And I think there was some outdoor stuff possibly that were part of that 50,000. So those items are already funded. So along with this, those items would more than likely get accomplished, correct?
Correct, because the ones that are listed under the EDA that are in their budget were the things that the EDA had approved. So we have funding for that in the EDA budget. And then there's funding in the general fund budget for the ones that are listed that say the 2020 general fund. The items that we do not currently have funding for that we've applied for the 2% are in the third chart, which are the proposed 2% funding. Those would be the items that we would need to look at if we were not to receive 2% that for other sources of funding or pulling them out of the project, however we would have to handle that. So that's how this is kind of set up in here. But we are, just so everybody's aware, we are doing the design for everything, because if we try to put these back in later, it's more cost effective to do this all now. Because it's possible there may be, we do the first two pies and then we come back and you can kind of see that a lot of the things that are in the 2% funding are exterior things. And so, if you take the stone base out and some landscaping and the sign, just a few of those things on that list, it's still possible to do the interior things and some of the exterior things we're doing, and then kind of piecemeal the rest of this together at a later date. Or maybe we can do it all at once. But that's kind of the way we set it up, so that we were trying not to have something in our list in the 2% possible funding that would affect something that's happening in one of the other lists that we have funding for.
All right, I believe Trustee Milky had his hand up just slightly earlier than Trustee Hauk.
I'll be quick. I just want to make a comment. This is a awesome project. I think it meets our global ends. And it makes the township a more attractive place to live. And thanks for all the effort that went into this. Thank you.
Trustee Hauk?
Yeah, I agree with Brian. One thing I'm going to warn everybody, I got a feeling this is going to come in higher than what we're thinking, because there's a lot of events that have happened. I mean, construction has been delayed, everybody's swamped, and now you had all the events over in Midland, and we're already getting calls to go over to Midland. So there's going to be a lot of work, and I know a lot of blocks cost a lot more to put in when you're talking cement block and stonework. A lot of that stuff costs a lot more this time of year when they're busy. Fishers are busy too, so hopefully the parking lot doesn't come in over budget too. So just my personal comments.
All right, further discussion? All right, seeing none, we take this up to vote. Let's see, we had a motion to approve, didn't we? Was Trustee Worley, correct?
Yes.
All right, do you want to read that motion again?
All right. To approve the proposals from Goodrow and Associates and Central Michigan Surveying and Development in the amount of $53,032 for the completion of construction documents and bidding services for the Jameson Park Master Plan improvements, and authorize the township manager to sign the agreements.
All right, so we had that motion with a second by trustee Lannon, I believe.
Yep.
So we take this up to vote. Clerk Cody?
Trustee Lannan,
Trustee who?
Lannan,
Yes.
trustee Worley,
Yes.
treasurer Rice,
Yes.
trustee Hauk,
Yes.
supervisor Gunning,
Yes.
clerk Cody, yes, trustee Milky.
Yes.
Motion carries. Move to the next item on new business. This is discussion regarding special assessment cost sharing policy.
Yeah, so you have some paperwork that begins on page 60 of your agenda packet. The Board of Trustees expressed interest in discussing the existing policy at your last meeting. The existing policy is also part of your packet, as is the citizen guide. I will note that, just in case you're curious, when you're looking at the policy that's dated May 7th, 2010, there's some discussion about borrowing money from the fire fund in a couple of these bullet points, and then discussion about repaying the fire fund. I'll just note that there was no borrowing done by the special assessment fund from the fire fund. That's not allowed. The fire fund is not allowed to loan that kind of money or any money. And instead what happened, because the special assessment fund did have a deficit in it, in 2014, there was a transfer from the general fund to the special assessment fund in the approximate amount of $105,000 to eliminate the deficit in the special assessment fund. The the way this kind of works, why do we even have a special assessment fund? It's intended to be used to the extent that it can generate cash, and I'll call it free cash and fund balance. Then the special assessment fund is used to provide cash flow to fund the project, because that money has to be paid up front. And then the special assessment role that is eventually created by the board, those monies are paying back that money that was paid up front, paid back into the special assessment fund, so that over time a balance is regenerated in the special assessment fund so that it can be used for a future project providing cash financing. So this is the discussion for the board. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. With that, we open discussion and we'll look for hands. Trustee Milky.
Maybe you said it, Mark, and I just missed it. What's the current status of that fund?
That fund, as of year-end 2019, had about $240,000 of available resource in it.
Yeah, and I think the idea, we're looking back in 2010, the Corvallis Drive, looks like that was in the neighborhood of 105,000. So 2 neighborhood road projects could pretty quickly eat that up. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. I will say the special assessment fund is currently, there's two types of projects being handled within it. One is paving, subdivision paving. The other is the board did a special assessment for sidewalks in the Bluegrass Isabella area. And those special assessment annual payments are going into this fund as well.
I think we did a light district as well in the past. That would have been when I served with you before, Tim. Does that ring a bell?
It does ring a bell, and I believe it shows up on my tax bill.
Oh, it's you. So,
I'm not sure if it's a special assessment or if I
and so
receive a bill for lighting through the township.
Right. So one of the concerns I heard from one of the neighborhoods that's pursuing use of this is amortization, and Supervisor Gunning brought this up at our last meeting as well. Amortization over 5 years. When my neighborhood was done, I believe it was at 10 years. And I think that makes a big difference as far as accessibility to these neighborhoods. The drawback, I'm assuming, and I want advice on this, but if we don't do the 10 years, we go to 5, we make it a more solvent fund because it's being paid back quicker. If we were to set a policy of a 10-year amortization, we may be in a position where we're having, if there are many projects coming on, having to push money into that fund so that we could help these projects. Is that also relatively accurate the way I put it?
if I may, the couple things. One, since we're talking about special assessments, I want to make sure we're clear on what's being funded and what's not. A moment ago, there was a mention of lighting. The lighting is not, yes, it shows up on your tax bill, but the lighting is not a special assessment role that was approved by the Board of Trustees, okay? And that's an important distinction. What you have is in some of these subdivisions, the lighting was constructed and somehow through the development plans and whatnot, the residents pay the light bill. So we get light bills from Consumers Energy, we pay those every month. And then we do internal machinations to figure out which of the residents and which of the subdivisions need to pay that bill back. Just a distinction, but I want to make sure that you realize lighting, there's not a special assessment role like there is a paving role or a bluegrass sidewalk assessment role.
And that's only because the board back in 2010 just didn't include that. Is that correct?
The developer paid for the capital, I believe. The developer paid for the capital expense of installing the lights, but not the monthly light bill.
Got you. And the reason I guess I brought that up, in the Citizens Guide, it talked about lighting districts. And that's what jogged my memory, apparently, of Trustee Lannon's neighborhood. But I guess I wanted to make sure the board had an opportunity to talk about the amortization. I know Ben and I have both heard that concern. Is that accurate, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to get to the balance of your original comment.
Sure. Yeah, please.
And that gets to the amortization. The current policy says that all special assessment repayment terms will be 10 years unless a lesser term is requested by the petitioners. That's your policy. And when this issue came up, when the request for petitions and whatnot were made, when the township was approached with this project, and then we went about the business of estimating the construction costs and all the other allowable costs, and then we spread that across the properties. The amount per property was $2,700. And I'm the one that indicated to the person spearheading this that the amortization would be something closer to 5 years. And I recognized at the time that the amortization period, along with a bunch of other things, are set by the board in one of a variety, one of various resolutions that end up needing to come before the board. In that citizens guide, there's about 15 steps. There's probably 4 board actions with public hearings. And so the board sets all that stuff. And I could just imagine me recommending to the board that somebody that owes us $2,700 would be allowed 10 years to pay that back. That just seemed unimaginable. That somebody would loan somebody $2,700 and allow them to pay it back over 10 years. That's where the 5 came from.
Thank you. I'm good for the moment, Supervisor Gunning.
All right. Further hands? Okay, but you know where the blue hand is there, Norm?
Yeah.
It's hard to do it when people are raising their hands. Okay,
When
I
I
see.
go over to the blue hand, it comes either mute or more. Let me just check something.
It'd be on bottom right, so she raise hand.
Yeah, I'm on that area, but I don't have the I don't have that choice. It's kind of weird.
Under participants, it says invite, mute, or raise hand.
And it's after my name, it has either mute or rename.
Bottom of the white,
It's the bottom there, Norm, at the very bottom.
not next to your name.
I gotcha. All right.
Okay, there you go. I'll call on you. Go ahead, Norm.
All right. One of the concerns that we have heard, I believe it was from the folks from the McGurk subdivision. The 2 concerns that were expressed were the 5-year rather than the 10-year amortization. And I understand what Mark is saying too, in terms of if the amount is so small, the 10 years is kind of weird to be doing it that long of a loan. But so one was the amortization, and the other issue had to do with the 15% administrative charge. I don't know what year it was that our subdivision in Carriage Lane that we had applied to the board for that to be paid. But at the time, the amortization was 10 years, or you could pay it all up front initially and then not have to deal with the interest being accrued. And also there wasn't the 15% administration. And, you know, I think Tim had brought this up in a meeting too. You know, when you're thinking about it, the subdivision, we improve the streets, pave them, etc. You know, that's a win-win for both the township as well as for the residents. You know, the township, you know, it becomes an asset that the subdivisions are on paved roads rather than gravel roads, which ours was originally. And it's something that for the residents, obviously they have for safety and better quality of life. It meets those concerns. So, and when we're looking at, you know, paving, when we're looking at other paving roads outside of town, outside of subdivisions, or graveling roads outside of divisions, you know, we're picking up a substantial amount of that tab and not putting on assessment on the individuals. Whereas in the subdivisions, people are having that extra, you know, taxation, so to speak, added to their bills. So I do think we have to have some consideration of this. And you know, it's come up now. I know our road is one of the grind and paves. We're beyond repair here at this point. And I think to add just that cost alone for about 3/4 of a mile is going to be, I think it's a mile now is what, $240,000. So 3/4, whatever that would be. And, you know, then you add on the 15%, then you have to amortize this perhaps in 5 years. That does become cost inhibitive for many folks. And so therefore it's not going to get done, which is a detriment to both the township as well as to the neighborhood. So I just think we should, you know, look at what the township is also getting out of this when neighborhoods are willing to pony up the money to put forth for the road. But I think it's important that maybe the township have a cost share involved in that as well. So this is the way I'm looking at it.
So that the board is fully informed, if I may, the
Whose dog is that, by the way?
We got a bunny in the yard.
So a new board member.
So he's not real happy about it.
I was thinking covert.
when we were estimating expenses for the purposes of a preliminary, for the purposes of circulating a preliminary petition, we included all costs that are, we estimated all costs that are allowable by your policy, by your existing policy. And that includes everything from the cost to publish the notice for these various public hearings, the cost for your staff to administer the special assessment role. And we estimated those, we had to pick a number. So we estimated those to be at 15% of the construction costs. It's not an unreasonable number. The actual number, unless you change your policy, would be that the actual expenses that are incurred are what become part of the costs that are levied, just like it ends up being the actual construction costs end up being what is charged to the residents within the district.
Trustee Melky, your hand is up.
Were you done, Mark?
Yes.
I agree with Norm's comments. This is my thought of this policy, and this was a board prior to one that I first served on back in 2010, that I interpreted it when we did our neighborhood as a win-win for the township. And that was a perfect way to put that, Trustee Worley, in that not only is the neighborhood getting assistance in financing and managing the project and working with the road commission, but the township is getting improved roads. And we want our neighborhoods to do that, I think. And I'm not sure I'm in a position where I want to entertain direct cost sharing. I think neighborhoods, they're private, should be footing their own bill in many ways. Our job is to assist to be able to accomplish it. That's my perspective. And we do have direct costs. And our manager mentioned some of those already, such as publication. There's potential for some legal costs, I'm assuming, if we get a lawyer involved. But we do have those indirect costs, and that would be of our staff. And that's something that I would be more inclined to entertain as a cost-sharing mechanism, is to provide that service at the cost of the township, even though it's an indirect cost, but not paying for direct costs. Because we do want to encourage and make this accessible to, I think, as many neighborhoods as we can, from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying. I go back to campaigning, walking neighborhoods, and Treasurer Rice. I mean, the Europe Subdivision Road is terrible, and if I'm gonna buy a house in that neighborhood, I'm gonna second guess whether I want to buy a house in that neighborhood because of the condition of that road. And when we make it difficult, because everything's relative. I hear $2,700 over 10 years. Well, that's still interest and 1% over prime, right? So you're still looking at somebody having to pull an extra $300-400 out of their pocket. And for some people, that's a lot of money. And so I just look at the board here, and I know that Trustee Lannis had a couple of special assessment districts in his neighborhood, and Trustee Nora Worley, you've had one since you've lived in your area, and Trustee Milky has had one. Our former Trustee Mike, has had one on Corvallis. And so we've all enjoyed, and some people are just going to reach into their pocket and simply just pay it, right? So if it's 16 or 1700 bucks, a lot of people, probably some percentage of them, I don't know what it would be, is just going to reach in and just say, here's 1700, just, get it over with. But I guess what I have real difficulty with is this is a policy decision. And I'm trying to figure out where the disconnect was, where decisions like this were made without any discussion from the board. To change from 10 years to 5, to add 15% of a fee, an administrative fee in there, which that, as you said, is a total guess. We're not supposed to be profiting off of our residents. They're already paying taxes. This is a service that we provide to enhance their neighborhoods, enhance the saleability of their homes, increase our tax base, make it more attractive for people to move into this area. And I don't know where the decision came from, and I don't care at this point in time who decided to come up with this stuff, but from an outward look, it looks at basically a profit generating mechanism, and we're not supposed to be in the profit generating business. We're not a business, we're a government. We are supposed to enhance our residents and their health and well-being and safety. So that's where I'm at with this.
Could I comment?
Yes, sir.
Because I'm the one that did it. And then the board also took some action with regard to this as well. There's no intent to make a profit. As I said a few minutes ago, the only charges that would be part of the special assessment amount would be the ones that are allowed by your policy. And they're only the charges that we have directly incurred, whether it's been a payment to the Morning Sun or to some attorney that we have an invoice for, or for staff time to support monitoring this, which we keep and have been keeping time records of. So there's no money being made here. The decision to charge these expenses was made by the board. You see the policy in 2010. It says there will be no township contribution or in-kind funding for these projects. So that's the basis of it. The term in when you approved to move forward with the preparation of the preliminary estimates of project costs back in August of 2019, it was indicated that the term length was 5 years. It was also indicated that the final terms and costs will be established and approved as part of the 9 steps of the special assessment process. So I just want to add that clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, and
yes, sir.
Thank you. Me? Yeah.
Yes.
And I completely understand your decision to go to five year is what you would anticipate the board wanting to approve on that. So I understand the logic that you went through. But I guess again, I don't know that we need to make any kind of changes to this policy tonight, but I would like, from my perspective, I'm going to restate it again. It's phrased in the policy: no township contribution or in-kind funding. And we have to be careful if we do in-kind funding that we're not doing special favors unless we're doing it equally for all. But I would certainly be willing to entertain changing that policy to remove some of that in-kind funding limit so that we can encourage these kind of projects and mitigate some of the cost to our neighbors.
Trustee
We'd be
Lannon.
happy to help you develop a policy with some direction by the board.
Trustee Lannon.
Yes, thank you. This came before us as a discussion item. Probably some of it basically spurred from ideas I've been bringing forth for a year or two now. So my hope was to look at the policy, dissect what is in there, how we're currently doing the business, and see what other directions maybe we could take, because I do think it would be important and equitable and fair if we could somehow support some of the road improvements in the subdivisions, as they seem to have been the excluded road system in our township for receiving some township general funds. Again, knowing that these roads are not township roads for the most part, they are owned and maintained by the county. So that would be an area that, and a door I think that would be knocked on, and have discussions, listen to their input, but try to uncover and turn over any stone that may be possible that where the subdivision is not considered, the folks who will not be receiving road funding. I think if you look at the tax base generated out of these subdivisions, houses are in close proximity. Probably some of the higher tax bases come out of these subdivisions. And so just an understanding of that financial impact and looking at all ways to somehow assist these folks who are interested in preserving their roads, which help preserve their neighborhoods, which help keep the values up. And as people are mobile, as Supervisor Gunning said, all neighborhoods would be considered in fair shape from that road perspective. So just like to continue the conversation and uncover the stones that maybe we need to turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lannon. I like what you're saying. I think you could actually even, as just an idea that we could talk about later, would be having something in the annual budget that would be directed towards encouraging those districts, whether it's a percentage of the project or whether it's a dollar amount that's always available. But yeah, I mean, you go through these, and we can't forget Clerk Cody's road either, because that one's definitely needed some love too. So, all right, Trustee Milky.
Real quick, just historical perspective. Previously on a previous board, the township actually did pave a neighborhood road that was gravel, Ruby Road, over off Broadway, kind of by Genchrist, and that was a really rare exception. And I think the board at that time, and that's when I sat on, we wanted to be very careful that we weren't setting precedent. But it was a major connector to that neighborhood. You can enter on Isabella from the west, and you enter that neighborhood from the south on Broadway. So there is precedent of the township having done fully funding of some paving of the neighborhood roads. Now, granted, that was probably only 1/8 of a mile, but it has happened before.
And I believe on the in-kind funding, I believe that was the reason for the 1% over prime, that I've been told at least, was to eliminate that concern.
So where do we want to go from here?
I think we need to add this as an agenda item, obviously. And have a policy that's clear. So whether it's obviously probably, I know these folks over McGurk would like to have some clarity so they can get started with their project and try to sell it to their neighbors, because I think they have to do the petition over again.
Is there enough consensus?
They don't have to do the petition over again.
They don't?
There's been a preliminary petition, okay, that allowed us to take certain steps that followed from your action back in August. Up until the time that the board approves the special assessment role, maybe just a little bit before that, everything that is being dealt with is based on estimates. And so even when and so right now to circulate the formal petition, which is what they're doing, keep in mind that is based on estimates. Those estimates are intentionally made on the high side. At the end of the day, when the special assessment is landed on, it's based on actual costs. And so what you're trying to do is avoid setting a special assessment amount that ends up being below what your actual costs are, because then the general taxpayer is going to be responsible for the difference. But it's only the actual costs that end up at the end of the day being special assessed. If there was any confusion on the part of the folks in the subdivision where they're trying to circulate a petition, and I've had discussions with several people, some that reside in the neighborhood, others that do not. It's been repeatedly said that it's been explained what the 15% is. And it's been explained that it's just simply an estimate. So I think, so what you're doing right now is, I don't know that how that would get in the way of whether or not the petition gets 51 signatures. Right now, the total project cost is estimated at $90,000. $11,700 of that is an estimate of the direct and indirect administrative cost estimates. $78,000 is an estimate of the construction costs, including a 10% contingency. So this has not gotten in the way of executing the petition. We are happy, and I think I've heard where I think you're wanting to go. We can bring back a draft policy for consideration that would remove a portion of, in this case, the $11,000 estimate, because some of that is an estimate of staff time. It's the indirect, in kind, those kinds of costs. Your policy could remove those. The other, if I'm hearing the balance of the board right, you may be interested in retaining direct costs that are associated with special assessment. We can work on policy language it gets to that point, we can also work on improved policy language on the amortization. I will, Trustee Melky made the point earlier that the longer you allow the money to be repaid, the longer it takes for you to accrue balances again in the special assessment fund to be able to do the next subdivision that may come along or approach you. You always have the opportunity to borrow the money, bond it, to provide that upfront cash flow. In this particular case, if you say you need $90,000, you got 240 available today. We could work on language for that amortization to make it clear that it's really up to the board, because at the end of the day, it is. Whatever your policy says, since it's your policy, you can override it. And at the end of the day, you're going to take a vote on a resolution that sets the term, whatever your policy may say.
Trustee Worley?
I think Mark addressed it. I was simply going to ask the board, is there a consensus at this point to at least direct Mark to bring back to us some of the ideas that we have thrown out in terms of how we'd want to put that in terms of perhaps a new policy or eventually a resolution, but just to come back with some ideas. Is there a consensus for him to be directed to do that? On the board?
Trustee Milky.
Briefly, I think there's a few concerns I've heard through this process. Some of them were very concrete, such as amortization, understanding that term and why is it this versus that. The other is why is the the overhead costs of the township so much. I mean, I understand the confusion or maybe concern that a resident may have over that, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not trying to judge it. I'm just saying I understand their perspective. But I think the other thing that I really heard is, how do we make this process more turnkey? How do we make it friendlier so that they understand better the ground rules, and they also understand better that this is a service or something that the township can provide to help neighborhoods take care of their own roads. So I think that was the other thing that I heard, and it would be nice. And any service we do as a township, the better we can make it easy for the user, the better. And I'm open to suggestions. I don't have answers to that.
Trustee Howe.
We need a road millage for the township. Seriously, the road commission agrees. There's 2 other townships in the county that have a millage for roads. That's why their roads are getting fixed. We are very demanding. I mean, a road millage would solve a lot of these problems.
I believe I was told in the when there was a countywide millage request that it actually passed in Union Township fairly easily.
Really?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if we see revenue sharing cuts because of census and or the effects of the pandemic on the economy, I mean, that may be the only way we can afford to do roads.
Right. Well, look at the budget cuts that the road commissions in the state nationwide are going to have to make next year. How much fuel has been bought in the last 2.5 months? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something we should probably discuss at some point too. I would agree with you, Bill.
So Mark, do you feel like you have enough direction from us to propose or bring back some drafts of some things?
Yeah, I do. I'll focus on the the non-construction cost component. And I'll also focus on the amortization period. In terms of the, I'll call it the interface between staff and the public, of course, there's always ways that can be improved. But I will say that throughout this process, I have personally had a lot of several communications, as has other staff, with the person driving this, both in person and electronic. And we created this citizens guide, which was reviewed back in 2018 to help with the type of thing you're actually, it's actually a pretty straightforward process. And so we'll bring some policy options to you that would end up impacting the dollar value of that line item that we call 15% admin fee estimate.
All right, further questions? All right, next item, item C. This is a discussion action item. This is to consider the request to waive fees on a water sewer account owned by Walnut Court LLC.
So a request was made to waive these fees. It's in your board packet. There's a staff report. Starts on page 76 of your packet. The request itself is in your packet. And some other detail regarding the account itself. So this is for the board to consider.
So we open this item up for discussion. Trustee Hauk.
Yeah, I just have a question for Kim Smith. It looks to me like there's a lot of turnover in this unit. It's,
The rental may be, I don't know that the ownership has much.
well, I meant I don't mean the ownership, I guess. It looks like there's a lot of turnover in the unit, like it gets, looks like there's been a lot of late bills on it.
Trustee Milky.
Thank you. I was reading through the history detail report, and I'm not sure I fully understand it. So I don't know if Kim or Mark is better to answer this. What I was trying to determine was when the first, let me back up. As I understand it, the bills go to the occupant in this case, and any notices go to the owner of the parcel or the property. And what I was trying to gather from the history detail report, so stop me if my assumption is wrong, right? That notices go to both.
Yeah. There you got it right the second time. Notices go to both.
Yeah, I just realized it didn't include both. All right, so
go to the occupant.
when was the first notice given? Is it back in essentially, is it August of 19, or I wasn't sure how to interpret this history detail report.
Brian, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Bill?
No, nothing. I think Kim was trying to say something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking up the detail report so I can, in the agenda packet, so I can tell you. They're a little difficult to read.
would have been in the August, September timeframe of 19.
That's kind of what I was taking from this. That would have been probably August.
I do notice that when a notice was sent out, that
August
the bill was
16th.
paid pretty dang quick, within a day or two. So it looks like when they did receive a notice that they cleared the account very quickly.
Well, here's one from 8/16 of 19, and then they got to shut off on that one, which would have been in September because
Yeah,
of,
okay.
and then there was one in
November.
20 of, and that one's not been paid. So you can see that, you know, it tells you every time a past due notice was sent. So it started accumulating back then.
The last
So-
payment received on this bill was April of 19.
Yeah.
Payment posted April 25th. So what I'm confused, I mean, it seems like in this case, even if it's multiple tenants, those tenants and the owner would have received notice. Am I accurate?
That's correct.
Let's see, Trustee Lannon.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw out a procedural thing in honor of a past trustee who would be throwing this out. Generally, we got a lot of conversation going on without a motion on the floor. And traditionally, we would really want to have a motion in a second
Okay.
and have the discussion.
We'll entertain a motion.
I have a question, but we have questions on how to even read this bill. So I mean, how am I supposed to make a motion when I can't figure out how to read it? Is what we have questions to the manager on it. So that's a little different than us just having kind of a discussion.
I think there'd be a motion and we'd discuss and understand and then take the vote and either approve or deny the motion that was made.
Treasurer Rice?
All right. Well, first, I will make a motion to consider the request to waive late fees on water sewer account owned by Walnut Court LLC so that we can discuss.
Or
Okay. Motion Rice, support Milky.
Okay. I just wanted to make a clarification in here because it looks like my email to Mark was put into our packet. And I had, mentioned, wasn't it stated that the fees were not going to be charged? There was an email that I sent right after that I had, had mentioned, sorry, didn't realize that it was 2019, not 2020. So I just want to make that clarification that, I had, then mentioned that I had noticed that it wasn't actually this year for this tax bill. So I just wanted to make that clarification there.
So in terms of reading all that detail, I mean, I can walk through you with that if you want, but the bottom line to me is, and what the salient information is that there hasn't been a payment on this account since April of 19. $156 of penalties and interest have accrued since then because of the non-payment. Bills go to the occupant, notices, whatever they may be, go to owner and occupant. We don't own the property. We don't manage the relationship between tenants and owners. In the request for waiver, there was some discussion about the lockdown and COVID and all that. You'll see in the staff report that the most recent fee that was added to that account was added March 5th. prior to any lockdown or shutdown or any of that business. So you're being asked by a ratepayer to waive $156,000 of fees, and you just need to decide if you want to do it or not.
Well, unless I'm missing something, I'm sorry, Tim has his hand up.
Yeah, Tim, I'm sorry.
No problem. Just kind of getting into semantics again, but the motion on the floor is to consider request to waive late fees. And we got into this at our last meeting, and maybe we should remove consider. So Kim, are you just requesting to waive fees or consider?
I just basically was wanting us to consider it. I didn't necessarily say I wanted the late fees waived, but if I need to change it, I can.
I supported it, understanding that it was a mechanism for us to discuss it.
Yes.
Not a motion to approve or deny the late fee waiver request.
No.
So the motion when we vote will be a motion to consider, not a motion to waive.
Technically, I'm not sure it's an actionable motion.
Yeah.
Nor do I.
You're going by the reading on the, you want to rephrase that to amend your motion?
Can I finish? Can I ask a question before we talk about all these? I just want to know one question here. Okay, so normally we just have a shut-off fee and then one fee. And this was like one of our previous kind of discussions, like a long time ago for another case. But there's a shut-off fee and a turn-off fee. I'm not understanding why there's two shut-off fees. So do you see what I'm saying? Like on 19, 30.
And then December 5th, yeah.
So, I mean, why is there another turn-off if it's already off?
The water was never, Mark, do you want me to answer that since it's?
Sorry.
One was a fee for shut off for non-payment. The other was a fee to turn off as requested, I believe, by the owner. And I will say, this is a duplex. There's one turn on off valve out at the street. There's 2 meters. One side of the duplex is delinquent. The other's not. We did not actually turn off the water, because to do so, you'd be turning off the water to the other side of the duplex that is current on their bill. And so then the next question that may come to your mind is, why are we charging a shut-off fee for water we're not actually shutting off? It's because if we could shut off the water, we would. So why penalize ourselves? We're trying not to penalize the other half of the duplex. We still have to look and manage and administer the account.
Okay, Treasurer Rice, do you want to amend your motion?
For point of discussion, I will, or, you know, to make it clarified, I will change it to take out consider. So I make a motion to waive the late fees on water sewer account owned by Walnut Court LLC for point of discussion.
Okay, so the motion is to waive.
I'll withdraw my support. Somebody else can support that.
I was gonna say it. I probably should have changed the way I said it, but that's how I had it. So. Okay.
I mean, you made a motion for the purpose of a conversation or us to discuss this. Whatever motion you made is fine and it's on the table. We do not have to vote on it until our discussion is done. Or you can pull it out or withdraw your motion. You don't have to amend your motion if you don't feel you want to.
can withdraw.
So the motion is to
I'll withdraw.
waive the fee. You're withdrawing the motion, okay?
Her original
All right.
motion.
Yep.
All right. So then we
Procedural-
need a motion. We need a motion on the table then,
Can I have a procedural question?
if I can answer it.
If if someone makes a motion for or against something, my understanding is the person that makes that motion, if I make a motion for something, I can't vote against it. And that's where I'm struggling, because I wanted to learn more information before I know where I'm at on the for or against. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. And you're right that if you make a motion to, in either direction, to approve or to deny, then that's the way you have to vote when it comes to the final vote.
I don't remember that one.
Now, if you second it, you can vote against it. Now, but the original motion maker can or has to
Vote in the way that they made their motion.
Yes.
Yes.
And I guess that's why I withdrew that, because I actually, I couldn't follow it. So
Okay, I see a lot of blue hands up. I'm gonna just randomly say Clerk Cody.
I just wanted to say my procedural piece before we got too far.
Okay. And Trustee Lannon.
Thank you. I guess I would like definitive answers about the motion maker having to vote the way they motion. What would the purpose of discussion for that individual be? You're not allowed to learn through discussion and take a change in your point of view. So to me, that sounds incorrect, but I guess I would ask Mark to clarify that through MTA or whomever.
That's Robert's rules.
Yeah, you're gonna go down a rabbit hole there. My guess is if it does exist, it's way down in the, Robert's rules. You don't follow them. You try to get the idea, but Robert's rules is, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages thick. You try to pay attention to the high level stuff. I have seen numerous times somebody that makes a motion for something that they subsequently vote against it. For a lot of different reasons. One, because they become better informed through the discussion. Others, they did it for, I'll just say, other reasons.
Trustee Milky, your hand was up.
Seeing that it sounds like there is not policy by this board to disallow someone to make a motion and then vote against it, I'm going to make a motion to deny the request to waive late fees on water sewer account owned by Walnut Court LLC.
Support.
Okay, motion Milky, support Rice, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've got multiple hands up. Is everybody has their hand up want to talk? Okay. So I'm confused at this point. Okay, I'm just going to just randomly go again. Trustee Lannon.
Thank you. I don't think there's anything in our policies that say we follow Robert's rule to the T. There's many versions. It's actually created for parliament of large numbers of people, not necessarily for a small board like ours. We do extrapolate some of the procedural ideas brought forth in that, but I can't imagine that someone would not be allowed to gain insight through discussion who made a motion and not be allowed to vote against the motion that they made. So as far as the policy and the board, I think it'd be no, you do not have to vote for in the affirmative of the motion you made.
Let's see.
Taking into consideration, you know, we do hopefully all stand to an ethical level, and we're not trying to play or game the system.
Okay, Clerk Cody.
I'm just saying, if you disagree with the motion you made, you always have the option to withdraw your motion if you don't agree with your motion to begin with. So if you're going to vote against your own motion, you can withdraw it, but you cannot vote against it.
Which is why
I've read in numerous.
Okay, one last question here or comment, and then let's get started. Let's get back to business here. Trustee Milky.
Real quick, lowering the hand is not always easy. There we go. I read through the background information, et cetera, et cetera. I am not seeing a step that the township took that put the owner in jeopardy here. Am I missing something? And so I'm asking the staff, I guess, am I missing something that would encourage this request to come forward to say the township screwed up?
I think the report is, one, I stand by what I say in the report.
Okay.
If we thought there was something that the staff did, I would say so. And if there was something that the staff did, I'd probably consider waiving it myself.
Maybe you should talk to Mr. LaBelle. I don't know, I'm kept my mouth shut, but I'm gonna tell you what the problem is if the staff would have treated Mr. LaBelle a little better, then he would have paid this bill. But the staff did not treat Mr. LaBelle nicely. So that's why he's pursuing this. Thank you.
I'm looking at the past behavior on the account, and what I see is that anytime there was ever any type of past due notice or shut off, is the amount was paid within, it looked like the longest one was 5-6 days, and the one is from what, 12/5 of 18, and then it was paid on 12/7. So it shows that there was a quick response when a notice was sent and received. And I guess I look at this and I'm trying to figure out if the notice was sent and received. I don't understand why. I mean, his past behavior would have been to have zeroed out the account, going back on the history that we received here. So I guess I'm not real sure where the bills were being, or notices were being sent, or whether they weren't being received. I guess I go back to another gentleman that's a very prominent citizen in the town who was away for the winter for the first time ever. And somehow they neglected to pay their water bill, and whoever was cleaning their house contacted them in Florida in January and said, hey, your water's shut off. And that particular person contacted the township, and I'm going to concur with what Bill said. It was not treated properly, in my estimation. And I believe his fees were waived by the administration. So they never had to come to the board.
No, they weren't. No,
They weren't?
No, they weren't.
He paid him.
He paid him, but the water got turned on pretty quickly too. But I guess you look at some of these, the past history, I guess, is that how many of these do we have? And when you have one that's been neglected this long and is out of character for that particular payer, is there anything beyond a notice being sent? Is there a phone call being made?
No.
To make direct contact?
No.
I mean, and maybe that's where a bit of the disconnect is.
This is $156 of late fees, and you have a motion. I'm not aware that, and if you're looking for precedent, I'm not aware that you've approved one of these in the past. I see one here where it was $500 that you denied the request. There's, you know, the applicant was verbally abusing staff. If you want to go there publicly, was politely asked to stop it. The reference to the prior staff, the prior account that was implied that the administration waived it, that was a different staff person. You got a business here that's managing property. Sometimes they miss things. It's $156. I don't see where you need to worry too much about it if you don't approve it.
Clerk Cody?
I'm still not seeing why there's 2 shut-off fees for $30. Like,
Well, how about if you change the 156 to 126, then what's the vote?
I mean, I would waive the $30 off of one of the, you know, the shut-off fees, because I don't think there should be 2 shut-off fees.
Kim, you want to explain where those come from?
Sure, I'll explain. So when the shut-off list is compiled, and this property was on the shut-off list numerous times, we actually generate a tag that is then taken to the property and hung on the door. If we're not able to shut the water off, which is the case with this property because it's a duplex, and we don't want to discontinue the water to the other side of the duplex, we do hang that blue tag on the door to notify whoever is living there, if there's somebody living there, that the water is in arrears, that the bill is in arrears. So there is actually a trip made to that property, and that tag is hung on there. It's still the same process. You've still sent out your shut-off notice. You still generated that tag. You have to keep track of it. You send a utility, you know, you send the utility crew out with the tag. They hang it on the door. So that's why that charge is put on the bill, because they still get the same amount of service as anyone else, other than they don't turn it off because they're not able to.
And then, like, the second one up, it says it was actually turned off. Is that why the meter didn't change at all? Like, I mean, because the meter.
No,
and then, like,
part of that is, you know, the way it's typed in. We have to go in and manually put those on each quarter. So everybody that's late who gets shut off, we have to go in and manually make an adjustment to their account on each individual account. So one time, one staff member does it and they put shut off because that's what we're doing. And, you know, it's the shut off day. The next one, late fee. So it's just a matter of, because you have to manually type all that in. It's not just you push a button and it puts that amount on every account. You have to manually do that on each account. So it's quite time consuming. And it's just the difference. And so you're talking about the verbiage. Is that what you're?
yeah, well, on the action red, it says where the meter, like if you go down to the 9.5 right above the bill adjustment, it's 15,88000, and then when you go up to the next one where it's the next turnoff fee, it's 15,96000, and then now it's again months later 15,96000. So was it actually shut off then for both of the duplexes because no more of the?
No, it was probably just vacant at that time, so there was no water that went through that side's meter. Because if no water goes through the meter during that quarter because it's vacant, then you would get the same read. We still read the meter, but it's just the same reader, the same meter read.
Trustee Worley?
You know, I think what we're struggling with is that we want to make sure that we have a policy in effect that's fair and just for everyone. My concern with waiving the fee is in terms of precedent setting, that if we waive it for one, a fair and just policy is that it should be then considered for anyone who comes in and asks for a reconsideration. So if we set a precedent now, for a fee being waived, it becomes unfair for those people that are making their payments in a timely fashion. So that's the part that I'm struggling with this, because I do think that anything that we do in the township should be fair and just. I was disappointed when our cost of service study was having to be canceled because of the Zoom and the pandemic and everything else. Because I do think that I was hoping that we would have more ability to discuss some of the fees that are charged in total. And we've discussed it. Some of those we have concerns about, as do I. And I guess I'm waiting for us to have that opportunity to sit down with Dawn and to be able to go through that study and see what we might be doing along the way in terms of adjusting fees. But I think in this case, fair and just isn't. I think that we might be setting a precedent that then becomes anyone coming in, you're going to have to do the same thing for, and that's where I'm hesitant in waiving this.
I can understand what you're saying, Norm. I'm kind of leaning that direction myself. I think that we've had a couple of these come up, and I really think that to me, when it's out of character in particular, and it looks like this is definitely out of character for it to go into arrears for basically almost a year, or a year actually, is that at some point there has to be, if the notices aren't generating that payment, then sometimes you have to assume that there's a disconnect somewhere. And so I don't understand why we can't pick up a phone. We have a phone number for the office. I just think that that's something that is just for good customer service. I think could averted this whole scenario. Is just picking up a phone and making a phone call and saying, hey, did you get our notices? Because I noticed you haven't paid, and typically you pay very quickly. Any further discussion? But I don't think we have any proper motion on the table here, do we?
Kim,
I made a motion to deny the request to waive the late fees on water sewer account owned by Walnut Court LLC.
And I supported.
Okay. So do we have any further discussion on this?
Mark was trying to say something a minute ago. I don't know if it.
I just wanted to get a sense of, Kim, how many accounts are on the original list after the due date?
There's usually anywhere from 300 to 600 shut-off notices that we send out on a quarterly basis.
And we never will have the capacity to review that 300 to 600 account number list and ascertain whys and wherefores and intents and all that and make phone calls.
No. And, you know, in this
I just don't want
particular
to leave
case,
anybody with a false sense of what we might be able to do.
So when it goes beyond, how many go past the 30 days? So in other words, when you send out a past due notice, how many of those, what percentage would you just guess go beyond that into the next pay period or billing period? Do most of them get taken care of after the first notices, or does it have a tendency to
a majority, some of them do. There are some that go to shut off every quarter. It just depends on the property.
Clerk Cody?
I do know that it does, you do get your water bill, God, what, a month ahead of time? So, I mean.
Yeah, you have
it's pretty
65 days
month.
to pay it before it's shut off.
A couple months then, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you shouldn't really have any late fees. The only question I really, you know, is why would you have two shut-off fees? You know, that's the only thing I really had an issue with. I mean, as far as late fees, yeah, you should have a late fee just because you have a couple months to pay it, you know? But yeah, just the thing that kind of threw me off a bit is the shut off fee. But now knowing there's duplex and can't really technically shut off both without, one without the other. So I understand kind of, that portion of it.
Well, do we have any further questions, or do we want to take this to vote?
Call the vote.
Or Cody? And this is to reiterate, the motion was to deny.
Deny the request to
waiver.
waive. Yep.
Okay, so this is deny the request to waive, motion made by Milky and supported by Rice, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Clerk Cody?
Okay, Trustee Milky,
Yes.
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
Treasurer Rice,
Yes.
Trustee Worley,
Yes.
Trustee Lannon,
Yes.
Supervisor Gunning,
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes.
Motion to request the waiving of fees was denied, and we move on to our next item in the agenda, which is a policy governance, 2.3 compensation and benefits.
So you have a report that begins on page 84 of your agenda packet. The purpose of these monitoring reports is to gauge whether or not, in this case, executive limitation policies that are articulated in your governance policy book are being adhered to or not. In reviewing compliance, the board should look at the manager's interpretation of the policy. Is it reasonable or not? Is the data that the manager is presenting to you, do you feel that's appropriate? Is it satisfactory for you to be able to come to conclusions as to whether or not the policy objectives are being achieved? There is an evaluation form on page 86 of your packet. This policy wording, it says, with respect to employment, compensation, benefits to employees, consultants, contract workers, volunteers, collective bargaining units, that the township manager shall not cause or allow jeopardy to fiscal integrity or public image. That's the very highest level of the policy. There's various subsections. One indicates that the manager can't change his or her own compensation and benefits, that the manager can't imply or guarantee employment to anybody, that current compensation plans and levels are that they shall not be inconsistent with the market. There's some data that I've provided to you. There is no time when the manager's compensation package is changed without board approval. The most recent change was voted on January 1 of 2020. The collective bargaining agreements, the last ones expired 12/31 of 19. They were negotiated and ratified by all parties prior to the expiration of that term year. They're now in effect until December 31, 2022. We did have a compensation study and classification study done so we would understand what the market is for our employees. And we're in the process of implementing that with the guidance of the board, to prevent fiscal jeopardy. We have instituted a couple years ago some long-term financial projections that we put these kind of programs up against to see if we can afford them. Healthcare benefit premium, we began a cost sharing of that expense under the previous collective bargaining agreement. We've continued that through the current bargaining agreement. So with all that being said, it's the opinion of the manager that the manager and the administration is in compliance with the policy.
Discussion? Clerk Cody?
I believe that township manager is compliance with this policy. That is all.
Trustee Lannon?
Yeah, I'd concur with Clerk Cody that Manager Stool Driver laid it out and is accurate in his explanation and the position that we are in regarding the compensation benefits 2.3.
And see, Trustee Worley?
Yeah, I would just say that the tonight's audit certainly reinforces just how well managed the township funds have been. And I think that some of the studies that we've had along the way to ensure that we be commensurate with other townships in terms of what we offer for salaries and benefits, and among yourselves. I mean, I think there's the whole thing has been done in a very well coordinated, very fair manner. And I think that the audit really spoke highly about the way the township is being managed fiscally. So I'd say we're certainly in compliance with this.
Trustee Milky?
I'll concur with the statements that were given. I do want to just make one note as I was reading through this before the meeting. 2.3.2 was the only one I felt like I actually can't benchmark, right? It is, as I read our manager's response to this, the response was no promise of guaranteed employment has been made or implied by the manager. It's the only one I can't really test for. And so I'm not suggesting that our manager has done anything wrong here. I'm only suggesting that the policy here is not something that we can measure.
True.
With the exception of the manager stating so, and I mean, I have no reason to disbelieve our manager on this.
Or if someone, were to have come to one of us to say, hey, but yeah, I totally get where you're coming from there.
I guess I bring that up only in the sense of, as I read that, I thought, is this something we can clarify so we could actually put a measurement on it? That's all.
Trustee Lamon?
Yeah, good point, Brian. And that's our duty. If there's wording that needs to be added or lines that need to be added in these in these monitoring reports, then we need to do that. So if it isn't clear, I would suggest that we come up with something. But a promise is really not really measurable. It is a position that we have someone of hopefully ethical standards in, indicating that a promise has been made, and therefore that is the gauge.
Right.
But if that's not good enough for the board, we can work on this statement.
Further
I
discussion?
didn't have a suggestion for it. I just noted that.
Further discussion? All right, seeing none, we move on to our next item. This would be again a governance related item. This is the Board of Trustees annual review of board governance policy 3.1 cost of governance.
And on this one, again, there's many subsections, but this is actually a pretty lengthy policy, but the highest level, it states that there's a recognition by the board that, and the quote is, because poor governance costs more than learning to govern well, the board will invest in its governance capacity. And then there's a lot of subsections under there. It gets into meeting pay, and it gets into board assignment, it gets into budgeting, time frames. And so if you've had an opportunity to review that policy, then the board can discuss amongst yourselves whether or not you feel you're in compliance or not.
So we open this up for discussion. Trustee Hauk?
I feel we are in complete compliance with it.
Any more blue hands? Trustee Melky?
Yeah, I think in general, as I went through this, I felt we were in compliance. And section 3.10.3, which is the beginning of the meeting policy section, I noted that because I actually typed up the original policy before it was voted in, and the original policy probably had this exact wordage or verbiage. The intent of this proposed draft is to provide taxpayers ... And I would suggest that we get rid of this proposed draft language that's in here because it's not a draft anymore. It's past policy. 3.10.3, first few sentences, or first sentence.
Just
Proposed draft, yeah.
of this proposed draft, and just wrote the intent is to provide taxpayers.
Yeah, and exactly. And it shouldn't say proposed draft, because when I originally wrote the policy up, and it was in work that was done with 2 other trustees, but I wrote this language up. It wasn't past policy at that point. So I had the verbiage in there, proposed draft. And that carried it over and got passed with that language in it.
Mark, if you can make those changes in that.
No problem.
Let's see, Treasurer Rice.
Tim was actually before me, but
Okay.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Kim.
Okay. I actually put that I didn't feel we were fully in compliance, only because in 10.3 or 3.10.3, number 10, the following is a list of meetings the board shall assign representatives to attend. We still do not have Union Township Planning Commission. All the representatives assigned. There's still a vacant seat, so that was why I thought that we weren't fully in compliance. But
I believe that's assigning a board member to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That's the way it reads.
okay, and
we do have a board member.
Right,
We didn't have a trustee that wanted to step up, so Clerk Cody took the position.
yeah, and I understand that. I wanted to, that was what I had wrote down. But yes, I do see that that's, talking about the board. So sorry about that. That was the only thing I had. So
Trustee Lannon.
Yeah, I'd have to put my vote that we are not in strict compliance with this. I think part of my decision on saying that is kind of the exercise we just went through in regards to considering waiving the late fee. I am kind of under the impression or belief that much of this had to do with a name associated with that request. And regardless, if we start putting ourselves in a position and looking at individual relationships, and a name should have no impact either way to consider waiving or not waiving. And I, from correspondence that was sent out, I think.
I voted for it, Tim. Here you go again. You're starting your stuff up again. I'm done with this meeting tonight. You start this stuff up all the time. I said before, yes, I did have a deal. I said that we should waive it. Then I got the information on it, and I agreed with Brian. But you start this stuff up every meeting, Tim. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of you thinking that I'm taking money and everything. It's just like we had the discussion out here when we were doing the extraction. You thought that I had something going on at my place. This is getting a little ridiculous. And the reason we don't have a person on the planning commission, on the planning commission, is because, why not? Because you guys won't vote for it unless it's a Democrat. And I'm sick of this. Yeah, shake your head no, Norm. You know it's true.
Trustee Worley?
I wanted to go back to what Brian had said. Hold on, I just got something weird. Okay. I just want to go back to Brian's proposal about the 3.10.3 purpose. Mark said he would take care of that. I thought an easy way to change that would be the intent of this provision, and take out the proposed and draft, and just have the intent of this provision is to provide taxpayers with a fair bit of that. So I think provision where it could just be added in there, unless Mark comes up with another Smith wording that's better than that, and leave out the proposed draft. So that's what I wanted to say.
All right. Further discussion on this item? All right, we move from that on to our next item in the agenda, which should be item 12, manager's comments. Mark.
I have none, thank you.
We move to item 13, final board member comment. Again, I'm going to kind of start from, I'm looking at right to left. So the first person up would be Trustee Milkey.
Real brief. I just want to go back to a comment that Trustee Hauk made, indicating that Mr. LaBelle was displeased with staff performance, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, Bill, because I understood what you're saying. I'm not suggesting I know what happened, and I haven't talked to Brandon LaBelle. I like Brandon. I have no issues with him at all. But I don't know what happened. But certainly if we see a pattern of that, because we're supposed to listen to our residents and business owners, right? That's what we do. That's who we listen to. They're our boss. And so I wish maybe Brandon would have reached out to more than just you, Bill. And so that, I mean, I'm not suggesting again that our staff did anything wrong, because I don't know. Well, we can always improve customer service. And if his experience was less than what it should be, then we should always look at how we improve that. That's all I have.
I made a point to call Brandon actually when we received the email and talk to him. And so, we're going to leave it at that. Trustee Lannon?
Yeah, I would just like to mention, as I did prior to the meeting of the group, that the Union Township fire truck is now being housed in the City of Mount Pleasant Fire Department. And training on that rig for the firefighters is going to commence shortly. And you will see it on the streets in June, I think would be accurate. Also, I'd like to commend Catherine from MTA on the terrific job she did on the new edition of the Little Red Book, or actually known as Authorities and Responsibilities of Michigan Township. Thank you.
Trustee Hauk. Oh, your mic's off, Bill.
Oh, okay, something.
There you go.
I have nothing.
Yeah, okay. Treasurer Rice.
I just wanted to apologize for earlier, the motion that I made. I was trying to make a positive motion in that to try not to influence anyone. And I didn't realize you couldn't make a motion for point of discussion to and vote against your own motion. So sorry about that.
Trustee Worley.
I think some things have been said tonight are a misrepresentation of intent. I think we all need to have a little bit of a pause here and step back, because I think at the end of the day, cooler heads do prevail. And I think we need to all keep that in mind, including myself. So that's all I want to say tonight.
Clerk Cody.
Okay, I have two things. One, I wanted to ask Mark if he had any progress on getting the Township a one-time recycle pickup.
Oh, you're
Your
muted.
mic's off.
And then I have one more after that.
I have not. I'll start looking in that tomorrow. I apologize.
But yeah, I've been getting a lot of calls and people asking me about it. So
I've also had several people contact me and that asking about that as well. So
Same here. I have an ice cream shop, so I've been getting a lot of people, and then I've had it come up multiple times. When you guys going to do recycling like the city? Or we're talking about it.
yeah, and I even saw there was someone who put their all of their recycling, they were moving and they threw all of their recycling in the trash and had it removed that way. And it's sad because, all that could have been recycled. So.
and then one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we should do a local preference policy as Supervisor Gunning suggested, or come up with something in the near future. And that is all.
Right. Oh, let's see here. It's been a long day for me, so I don't really have anything I want to add. I think everything's been said, so I think it's best that we all just head off on our own way. So at this point in time, we'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Ben, before you do
Yes.
that, I believe item 11 on the agenda was missed.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yep. Extended
Okay.
public comment. Yep.
At least create the opportunity.
Okay. All right. So at this point, we have extended public comment. This is restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. If there's a resident that would like to bring forth the public comment, your opportunity is right now.
Nobody here.
Seeing none, we close public comment and we move to motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Or
Motion support. Roll call.
Clerk Cody, yes. Trustee Milky,
Yes.
Trustee Lannon,
Yes.
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
Trustee Worley,
Yes.
Treasurer Rice,
Yes.
Supervisor Gunning.
I don't think so.
Oh, you're on your own. Bye.
I'm just gonna hang here by myself. Meeting adjourned.